What if humans could become invisible at will? Close your eyes for a moment. Take a deep breath. Now imagine a world where, with just a single thought, you could disappear. Not like someone fleeing in haste and fear, but like someone gently shedding the weight of being seen. Picture your presence dissolving like the steam from a hot cup of tea, rising and blending into the coolness of the morning. What if you could erase your form like a chalk mark fading from a clean blackboard? Not just vanishing from the sight of others, but from the very fabric of reality, like a shadow, choosing to hide in the night, leaving no trace behind. Now open your eyes. You're still here, solid, visible, anchored in the world. But what if you weren't? What if, for a brief moment, the line between the real and the impossible snapped? Imagine the air around you shimmering as if it were made of transparent silk, your skin disappearing as if being swallowed by the light itself. Imagine the absolute silence of your presence being erased, the sensation of becoming more of a whisper than a person. You are no longer seen. You are no longer perceived. You have become a secret, a living mystery that the world will never uncover. So, how does that feel? Can you sense the chill? Because today we're going to explore this world of possibilities. A universe where invisibility isn't fiction, where it's not a power that exists only in movies or comic books. It's a gift, a power you carry, as simple and natural as breathing. But with it come questions. What would change if we could disappear at will? What would it be like to live in a world where anyone could be present, but invisible? What would we gain? What would we lose? And most importantly, what would we discover about the world and about ourselves? Imagine the moment when you first discover that you can become invisible. It's not something that happens with a warning or an instruction manual. It's an unexpected moment, almost silent, yet so significant that the world around you seems to come to a complete halt. You're alone, perhaps in your room or sitting in an empty park. Suddenly, there's a different sensation, like a shiver, that starts at the nape of your neck and runs down your spine. It's almost imperceptible at first, but soon you realize something is changing. Your arms, your hands, they're not like they were before. They're fading away, slowly, as if the very air is swallowing them. There's no pain, no immediate fear. There's only fascination. You are disappearing. You look in the mirror and your reflection is no longer there. First, one hand disappears, then the arm. And then your face starts to fade, like an old photograph that's been bleached by the sun. You wave your hand in front of the mirror, but nothing appears. The emptiness where you should be is mesmerizing. A mix of emotions pulses within you. A strange freedom, but also a twinge of unease. You feel the weight of not being seen, of being nothing more than an idea in space. What's most striking isn't what you see or don't see in the mirror, but what you feel. You realize you're still there, still solid, still breathing, but the world around you no longer reacts to you in the same way. It's as if you've become a ghost in your own universe. Curious, you take a few invisible steps around the house. The sound of your feet on the floor is the same, but now it feels as if it doesn't belong to you. You pick up objects, a cup, a book, and watch as they float in the air with no apparent explanation, like effortless magic tricks. The world seems the same, but you feel like you're seeing it from a completely new perspective. You walk to the window and look out at the street. Outside, people continue with their lives, unaware that you're watching them, invisible. Someone rushes by, another person talks on their phone. You could be right there beside them and they would never know. There's something thrilling yet frightening about that thought. It's as if you've uncovered a secret truth of the universe. Something that no one else knows. Something that only you can feel. And then comes the inevitable question, what do I do now? You feel a wave of possibilities unfolding before you, like a trail in a forest that has never been explored. You could use this to play, to observe, to disappear when the world becomes too much. But at the same time, you feel the weight of this power. Because in disappearing, you realize something you've never noticed before, how important it is to be seen, to be acknowledged, to be recognized. In that first moment of invisibility, you encounter absolute freedom. and at the same time, a new kind of loneliness. What seemed like a magical gift begins to reveal itself as something much deeper and more complex than you could ever have imagined. Now imagine a world where invisibility isn't a rarity, but something commonplace. Not a trick reserved for sci-fi movies or urban legends, but an innate ability that everyone possesses, like breathing or blinking. A world where anyone at any moment can simply disappear. You walk down the street and everything seems normal. The sound of footsteps, the murmur of conversations, the distant sound of a passing car. But is it really normal? You feel a slight shiver, a sensation that something is there, something invisible. Are you alone? Perhaps someone is standing right beside you now, just watching. An invisible spectator in the theater of life? This thought makes your mind race. How would we trust each other? In a universe where anyone could vanish into thin air? In this world, life would be a constant game of possibilities and secrets. Imagine walking into a classroom and never being sure how many people are actually there. The reserved seats for meetings, discussions, negotiations, all would become spaces ruled by doubt. An invisible friend might be laughing beside you without you knowing. A stranger could be listening to every word you say. Parties would be silent for those who aren't visible, but vibrant for those who chose to reveal their forms. Parks full of invisible people might seem like deserts, but in reality they would be pulsating with hidden lives, like a symphony that you only perceive when you listen closely. Now think of the possibilities for those who love the freedom of disappearing. An invisible artist painting murals on walls without anyone witnessing their process. An explorer crossing mountains, rivers, and deserts, leaving no trace behind. Or lovers choosing to vanish under the moonlight, their forms dissolving into shadows while they share a moment that no one will ever witness. But at the same time, imagine the shadows of living in such a universe, the constant fear of being watched, the anxiety of never knowing if you're truly alone, the whispers of invisible voices that might arise in an empty room. In a universe where no one is required to be seen, how would we distinguish presence from absence? Yet there's something even deeper in this world. It wouldn't just be a matter of disappearing. Invisibility would reflect our most intimate choices. Who would you choose to be when no one is watching? Who would you become when all expectations and judgments vanished? Perhaps you would reveal your true self, living without masks, but perhaps, just perhaps, you would also discover that being seen is an essential part of existence. Because in a world where everyone can be invisible, the greatest courage might be choosing to remain visible, to show yourself, to expose yourself, to say, I am here. Being invisible would be fascinating, but paradoxically, it would also force us to value even more what makes us human: connection, recognition, and the simple act of being noticed. Invisibility. At first glance, it sounds like something magical, almost impossible to believe. But what if, instead of magic, it were science? A science so advanced, so incredible, that it would appear magical to our eyes. What, after all, would be necessary for a human body, so solid, so full of details and textures, to simply vanish from sight? For your skin, your bones, and even your shadow to become invisible to the world? This is where fantasy begins to intertwine with reality, because, as unbelievable as it seems, scientists are already exploring the foundations of this phenomenon. And what they've discovered is as fascinating as a fairy tale, but real. Think of a chameleon or an octopus on the ocean floor. They are masters of camouflage, capable of blending into their surroundings with an almost supernatural precision. But what they do is quite different from disappearing. They manipulate the light around them, changing colors and patterns to hide. Now imagine if our bodies could do something even more impressive. Not just reflect the light around us, but literally bend it. Distort the light rays in such a way that they pass through us and continue on as if nothing were there. It's as if every cell in our body became a microscopic mirror, a prism that redirects light back and forth, turning us into an invisible portal. And the most amazing part? This isn't so far from the science we know. There are materials called metamaterials that can already bend light in ways that defy logic. They function like invisibility cloaks, making objects disappear by manipulating how light interacts with them. Now imagine these materials applied to the human body, like a second skin, or even better, integrated into our DNA. Picture a future where genetic editing gives us special cells like those of an octopus, capable of reflecting or bending light at our command. It wouldn't be magic, but it would certainly feel like it. And the most intriguing question, if this were possible, who would we be when no one else could see us? But what if invisibility weren't just about light? What if it were something deeper, something almost spiritual? Think of invisibility as the ability to dissolve into the reality around you, to merge with the space. Perhaps it isn't a matter of physics, but of perception. What if, instead of changing what others see, you could manipulate how the minds around you perceive you? Being invisible not because light bends around you, but because people simply forget you're there. Imagine the power of not just disappearing from sight, but becoming a living secret within the very fabric of human consciousness. In this case, science wouldn't just be a tool, it would be a new way to explore what it means to exist. Because, in the end, invisibility wouldn't just be about what you choose not to show, but about what you decide to keep hidden. At first, being invisible seems like a gift from the gods. The freedom to walk through the world unnoticed, to observe everything and everyone without limits, without judgments, without gazes that weigh us down. But how long does it take before what seemed like freedom begins to transform into loneliness? You disappear, and at first it's exhilarating. You escape from problems, from expectations, from the constant need to perform for the world. But gradually, you start to notice something strange. The feeling that in vanishing, it's not just the world that has stopped seeing you, it's you too. It's as if, in erasing your image, something within you also begins to fade away. Imagine for a moment living invisibly for days, weeks, months. In the beginning, it might be fun. You feel light, as if you can escape all the responsibilities that come with being seen. But over time, you begin to notice an emptiness, a kind of echo around you. Who are you when no one can see you? Do your actions still matter even if no one witnesses them? The smile you give, the tears you hold back. Everything seems to fall into a bottomless pit, with no eyes to capture it, no hearts to feel it. It's like shouting in an empty place where there's no one to hear, not even yourself. Being invisible, then, stops being a power and starts to feel like a burden, a shadow that you carry alone. Think about life as it is now. Try to remember a day when you felt ignored, forgotten, as if the world around you was spinning while you remained still, invisible in the crowd. That sensation of emptiness, of insignificance, is something we all experience at some point. Now imagine that feeling amplified. Imagine that no one could ever see you again. There are no gazes to recognize you, no gestures to return. Even the simplest details, the reflection in the mirror, the shadow on the ground, disappear. Suddenly you begin to understand. It's not just the gaze of others that defines us, but their presence in our lives. And in the midst of this emptiness, an unsettling question arises. What happens to those who are already invisible even when they're in plain sight? The marginalized, the forgotten, those who live in the shadows of society. For them, invisibility is already a reality, though not by their own choice. Perhaps in the end, the weight of not being seen isn't just about disappearing, but about realizing that being invisible is more common than we imagine. Because deep down, we all want to be noticed. We all want to leave a mark, a trace, proof that we were here. After all, what truly makes us human isn't the ability to disappear, but the courage to be seen with all that we are without hiding. Ultimately, invisibility isn't just about vanishing. It's about what we leave behind when we do. What remains of us when the world cannot see us? When you fade from people's gaze, all that's left are the traces you've left. A footprint in the sand, an object out of place, a scent, a memory. What happens to that last remnant? That silent echo of your existence? Perhaps the greatest mystery of invisibility isn't the act of disappearing, but the way we still persist, even when we're not seen. Because even in absence, we continue to exist. Our presence in some way is still felt. And here arises the deeper reflection. Have we spent our whole lives trying to leave some sort of trace? Are we not all in some way trying to mark the world around us? to leave an impression that lasts longer than a moment? Whether it's in an act of kindness, in a word spoken at the right time, or even in the smile we share with someone. Being invisible would force us to confront this brutally. After all, without the gaze of others, do our actions still hold meaning? Or is what truly matters the connection, the being remembered, the light we project into the hearts of those around us? Perhaps the last trace we leave isn't something physical. It's not a footprint, a shadow, or even a clear memory. Maybe the last remnant of someone is that inexplicable feeling that lingers, that gentle longing that echoes in those who crossed our path. Even in invisibility, we exist in the smiles we provoke, in the glances we encounter, and in the way we touch the lives of others. And perhaps in the end, what defines us isn't the light that shines on us, but the shadow we leave in the hearts of those who saw us. Because being human is about this. It's about existing in others, even when we're no longer there. Now, I want to ask you something. What if it were you? What would you leave behind? What traces of your world would continue to exist even when you disappeared? This is the most profound reflection of this exercise in imagining invisibility. It reminds us that deep down, what truly matters isn't being seen, but being felt. So before we go, I invite you to share in the comments. What would you do if you could become invisible for a day? What would you discover about the world? Or about yourself? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to keep exploring amazing ideas like this, and give a thumbs up to help spread this special conversation. Let's continue together, imagining, dreaming, and reflecting. Because at the core, being seen is more than a matter of eyes. It's about connection. And I'm so glad to have connected with you today. Until next time.